Okay, looks like it is going.
Okay, thank you. It is 1 p.m. on September 29th, 2025. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board. I'm the chair, Janet Hurley, and I will ask board members to introduce themselves. Sarah.
Good afternoon, Sarah Hod.
Kirsten.
Kirsten Sultan, present.
Brooke.
Brooke Dinkeldean, good afternoon.
And Alex.
Alex Weinhagen, hello everyone.
And do we have any updates to the agenda from board members? I see shaking heads all around, so we will move right along. Opportunity for public comments on non-agenda items. Thomas, that's you if you have any.
I actually do have one now that I think about it. This is Thomas
Okay.
Weiss, resident of Montpelier. And over the weekend, I looked at the documents on the Rutland Regional Planning Commission's submission. And I found the future land use map to be non-intuitive to use, and I got caught somewhere in a screen that attempted to show me only the Tier 1B areas, and I couldn't get back from there. And it was not the same screen as the map screen. It had a bunch of blue bars at the top and a bunch of blue bars at the bottom, and every time I tried to enlarge it to zoom in, it made the blue bars bigger and the portion of the map even smaller. I apologize for not having more details on that, but
So Thomas,
that was
maybe what I would suggest is meeting with one of us to sort of maybe share on screen what you're seeing and maybe give you some guidance as to how to use the map viewer.
I was using the map viewer, and then there was something that said go to, just show the Tier 1B areas, and that's when it took me somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can do it again, see if I can figure it out. And if I can figure it out, I'll let you know. And if I can't figure it out, I'll let you know as well.
Okay, and maybe you can make an appointment with me or somebody, and we can sort of go through the map viewer on screen together.
The map viewer worked fine. It was when I
Right, but
I don't know
somehow you got
yes,
from the
okay,
map
I
viewer
thank you for
into
the offer,
some
and I accept.
Netherland. Yeah, so okay. We'll help you work it out.
If there's time at the end of this, before the end of the day, at the end of this meeting, I'm happy to just look at it with you, Thomas.
Well,
Okay. Thanks, Pete. Okay, anything else from Thomas at this point, since you're the only public?
No.
Okay. So the consent agenda is to review and approve the September 22nd, 2025 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
A second.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Okay, thanks.
So motion to
Any-
review and approve with any corrections?
Correct.
Okay, any
So seconded.
corrections? Other than the apostrophe S for board at some point, which I don't think is worth fixing if it's the only fix. Any others? All right. Let's accept it as is then. Perhaps. All those in favor of approving the September 22nd meeting minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. We have approved those minutes. Next on the agenda, operations, budget, and legislative updates. Rachel's going to provide an overview of how we're going to be assessing the budget. And do you want to take it away, Rachel?
Sure. Yeah, I will preface this by saying that the board members received a draft of the budget line items and the budget adjustment line items on Friday this week. Those materials were only today uploaded to the website, but I will, my expectation is that we're going to be talking about these materials for the next several board meetings. So there will be opportunity, for comment and kind of an elongated discussion. Today is really just a primer on the budget process and then setting the stage for future discussions about digging into those details, or if all of you have questions today, I'm happy to take those as they come. So just as backing up, we are in the process currently of preparing a fiscal year 27 budget and a fiscal year 26 budget adjustment. We're currently within fiscal year 26 as we're talking today. Both of those submissions are due to Finance and Management on October 14th. So there will be a narrative that, accompanies both of the line items and the details of the budget. But I think we can start with the line items and move on from there. I'll back up and say throughout the month of August, Janet Hurley, Sarah Had, Peter Gill, and myself have been having regular meetings discussing approach to the budget. So what we're bringing to the board today is, a result of some of those discussions, as well as like our historic funding sources and expenditures for our organization. I'll stop there to see if there are any questions, then I'll soldier on. Okay. So after this submission on October 14th, there's typically a time period in the beginning of December where we may need to reconcile some of these line items as a part of the budgeting process. There are certain line items that need to be forecasted as a part of your first submission, but may be adjusted based on conversations that Finance and Management will have with other state organizations, such as Buildings and General Services or Human Resources. They have rate setting that they will do in late October, and we will be given those adjusted values in December, and those need to be incorporated into our budget once they are known by those organizations. So some of the line items in this budget are modeling a 3% increase on line items that we pay for services from other state organizations. But they may be greater than that and would need to be absorbed in early December. Ultimately, the governor proposes the budget to the legislature in late December or early January. And then from there, it would go into, committees, typically the House first and the Senate second. So this is the beginning of a very long budget cycle. Happy to start talking through the line items if there are no other comments about the overall timeline. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Not a question about the timeline, but the estimated 3% you said would quote unquote need to be absorbed. Do we have an opportunity to adjust our budget, our mid-October budget proposal after those adjustments are more concrete? Like, or
Yes.
after those, okay. So after
Yeah.
BGS and so on gives us that information. Okay.
Yes, in early December, finance and management will aggregate that information and present it to receiving agencies. And then we'll need to reconcile our budget to those numbers. Like I said, the
Like, so those,
recommendation from finance and management is at this stage of the budget process to model those costs at a 3% increase over what we paid for in fiscal year 26.
okay, so the 3% came from finance and management.
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
don't
thank you.
assume that on my own. They're part of the
Okay.
technical instructions from finance and management. Any other questions before we?
Maybe I'll
Yeah.
just point out, Rachel, that that the budget, you'll see that almost everything has 2 line items. Every item is really assigned to 2 different accounts, one being our special funds and the other being the general fund. And so they're split between the 2. And that's why you see everything twice. And do you want to say anything more about that, Rachel?
Yeah, well, I'll just say that part of the exercise that we went through in August, this Janet, Sarah, Pete, and myself, we looked at, our funding sources are currently sourced from 2 locations. The first is the general fund, which is, an appropriation from the state's general fund. The second is the Act 250 permit fund, which is intrinsically tied to our Act 250 permit revenues, which, given all the changes that occurred in, Act 181, those revenues are likely to change, moving into fiscal year 27, because certain things are going to arise, like Tier 1A areas will be approved at that point. Tier 1B areas will be approved at that point. The road jurisdictional trigger will be back in effect. So, and some of the interim housing exemptions will be tapering off, during this fiscal year. So it was prudent that we went through. We took a look at the last 3 years of receipts for our special fund revenue to kind of understand where should we be targeting our special fund revenue to land now that we have, more of an idea of what Tier 1A areas may be approved and how they would be approved. So as a result of that analysis, I think we really landed in the 1.3 to $1.5 million range as being the appropriate target for our special fund revenue, which is a substantial change from fiscal year, 25, which is the last year that we just finished up in June and we have actual receipts for. So when that's on the funding side of things. On the expenditure side of things, which you'll see in the line items of the budget, Janet's right that we typically have in the past done splits on any one line item. A certain portion of that may be attributed to the general fund, and a certain portion of that may be attributed to the Act 250 permit fund. So there are couplets of line items for postage, for example. You will see 2 line items in the budget paperwork, one for the general fund, one for the special fund. So sorry for the long-winded.
Very elegantly put. Couplets. Okay. I like that. Alex.
2 quick questions, Rachel. Well, first, thanks for putting all the information together. I read through it this morning and it was super helpful. Are the couplets necessary on the expense side? I would assume that's been the tradition. I'm just curious if it's necessary. It's cumbersome, as I would imagine you already realize.
One of the things that I'm proposing this year is to reduce those couplets in our operating expenditure category, because I agree with you, Alex. I I don't think it's necessary. So you'll see, there is a difference between, there's a column in the spreadsheet called difference between the governor's recommended and as passed. That's kind of rectifying the difference in what we're proposing for fiscal year 27 and what was passed in fiscal year 26. The primary difference, or where you see changes in that category, is reducing those fund splits. And I think we've landed in a different place than where we have been historically. And I don't think it serves us anymore to have those fund splits for our operating expenses. I hope that answers the question.
Any chance? So I'm guessing then that there will continue to be some couplets. Any chance we could just get rid of all of them this year and start fresh with?
Our personnel expenses are too great. Well, I think it's still prudent to split our personnel expenses. And this year is a change from the previous years. What I would attribute this, that arises from the revenue change that we received in fiscal year 26. In the past, we were 80% funded from special fund revenue and 20% funded from general fund. Now we're basically reversed. So what I'm proposing this year in fund splits is that 85% of our personnel services would be sourced from the general fund, 15% from the special fund, and all of our operating expenses would be attributed to the special fund. And I think that is, why am I doing that? I think that is also consistent with how we are paying invoices year to year and historically going back many years. I think that is just kind of aligning our budget more closely with our day-to-day operations and accounts payable and accounts receivable.
So just so I understand, and I don't want to make any more of this, we can move on, but the couplets or the splits, are they necessary for the governor's office and the legislature to be able to create the budget and approve it? Or are they really not necessary for that, but they're helpful for us in terms of our own accounting within our program?
Yeah, we couldn't avoid it completely just based on the proportion of revenue or appropriation that we receive, right? Appropriation and revenue. I don't think that we could avoid it in every category. So I'm trying to minimize it only to be for personnel, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to limit it as much as I can, if that makes sense.
No, that's great. I'm just used to seeing that on the revenue side and not reflected on an expenditure side, especially for organizations that have more than 2 funding sources. They might, if there's 5 or 6, it would be silly to try to reflect those on the expense side. But my other comment or question was, before you jump into the line items, and I don't know how long we're going to spend on this because, like you said, multiple meetings. Do you want to just remind us all of the instructions, the sort of bottom line instructions that we receive from the governor's office in terms of how much of an increase we can budget for?
Yeah, so I think a couple high level things. Thank you for teeing that up, Alex. There's a specific program that allows us to forecast forward personnel expenses. Those come with lots of different assumptions based on healthcare costs or other benefit rates. They also include certain human resources information about cost of living increases or step increases for our classified employees. So we went through and made all the appropriate changes based on all of our staffing changes since last year. In addition to that, I mentioned the internal service funds, which are state to state transactions. Those are for the purpose of this exercise, they should be forecast at 3% increase over what was passed in fiscal year 26. So that was carried out as well. I will just say on that front, I expect that we would have more that we would need to accommodate in that December timeframe, but we're gonna leave it as is for now. On the governor's recommended, or the governor's instructions, what they are instructing is that you should have no more than a 3% general fund increase. And this year, what we are proposing is a 6.8% general fund increase. Really, the difference here arises from the fact that in fiscal year 26, what was accommodated in our budget was a half year of funding for 2 coordinator positions. And in our fiscal year 27 budget, we have a full year of funding for those 2 positions. Without that increase, we're at a 3.2% general fund increase overall. So I think this is we can explain that within a narrative, accompanying narrative, that we're pretty much holding to the 3% general fund increase, with the exception that we are funding these positions that were created in the budget bill last year. Does that make sense, or any questions surrounding that? I will also say that, oh, go ahead, Kirsten, I see you unmuted.
Well, I'm interpreting that the instructions don't prescribe that we do otherwise. With respect to the situation with these 2 half-funded positions now becoming.
What do you
Fully
mean
funded.
other? Yeah, what do you mean
Well,
otherwise?
there's nothing in the instructions that says we can't do that. Like we're just putting forward that rationale for why it's.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's
Okay.
a fair proposal to create, and I think it's probably in line with what other agencies propose, for newly created positions, if that makes sense. Certainly there's always room for the governor's office to, ask us to revise this, or the legislature to ask us to revise this, excuse me. But I do think it's the best course of action to put forward this proposal. But that's up to the board to make a decision on. I will also say that those internal service fund charges are, some of them are based on headcount. For instance, like workers' compensation, general liability insurance, or, other costs to human resources, or, the auditor's office. Those are based on headcount. And from fiscal year 26, we have a different headcount than last year. So I expect those internal service fund charges to go up. And I think there is room to accept some of that, the vast majority of that increase in our special fund revenue. Like I said, we did the analysis of the last 3 fiscal years and looking towards what would be the case for our revenue streams, our fees in the coming fiscal year. And I think there's room in our special fund revenue to accept a lot of that change. So I can share my screen if that is helpful, or we could leave it there and talk about line items at our next board meeting. You tell me. I would also like to give you a primer on the budget adjustment for fiscal year 26. So
Can
why don't
we,
you-
can we have you do that first, Rachel, so that we don't run out of time and not get to it, and then come back for line item discussion. Alex?
That was gonna be my suggestion too. I
Okay.
prefer to do the 40,000 foot level and save the line items for the next meeting.
That was my plan. Okay, great. So it sounds like we have some consensus. So for the fiscal year 26 budget adjustment, that is something that can be submitted, again, submitted on October 14th this year, and would be taken up by the legislature in January. What I'm proposing in this budget adjustment is really additional expenditures that cannot be sourced from other line items of our existing budget, to accommodate our staff, responding to the governor's return to work executive order. So this is really looking at what would it take to, in staying within our existing footprint, how to accommodate staff, appropriately in several buildings, moving out equipment, purchasing and moving in new equipment for people to be able to have a functional work environment. I think a lot of this is, some deferred maintenance, but again, we have a much different headcount than we had, when we started the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think there's some growing pains there. That would be the majority of the line items of the budget adjustment. There is also an opportunity in the budget adjustment to pursue a technical correction relating to personnel. And I think maybe I'll allow Pete, that might be a great segue into what Pete wanted to talk about and share at the meeting today too. So you can propose, both expenditure categories as well as in a narrative form, technical language that could be incorporated into the budget adjustment bill. Questions about that?
Okay.
So
Kirsten's got a
just
question.
quick, the carry forward plan that was approved plugs into that
Plugs into
or plugs into the 27, sorry. Right?
it plugs into 26. What we proposed carrying,
Oh, that's right. It
last
was
year,
20. Okay. Yeah.
it's currently
I
26.
know we got 25, 26, 27.
Yep.
Okay.
In any
Thanks.
one year, you're usually looking at 3 different budgets, so it can be confusing. No, what we provided in our carry forward plan at the end of fiscal year 26 carries forward to this fiscal year 26. Sorry, did I say that right? At the end of fiscal
Yeah.
year 25
5.
carries forward to fiscal year 26. See, I'm just turning myself around too.
And the
Alex?
Budget Adjustment Act that we're talking about is fiscal 20, would affect fiscal 27.
No, budget adjustment would affect fiscal year 26, which is where
Okay.
we currently are
Okay,
today.
so
These
that
are-
in addition to the carry forward
Would increase
affect
our,
fiscal year 26. Yeah.
precisely, yeah. Alex?
Yeah, so we can talk line items on the budget adjustment spreadsheet you provided next time, just like the FY27. I wanted to take us back to the instructions for FY27 and acknowledge that the way I read it, like you said, 3% increase is what the governor's office would like us to stay within. But there was an acknowledgement that health insurance costs, we should be budgeting those at a 5% increase. And what the memo indicated was you still need to meet your 3% overall increase, even though you need to budget a larger increase for health insurance. And they basically said, you got to find other places to, increase less than 3% to make these numbers work, including, temporary personnel or whatever it is that we need to do to meet those targets. So we don't need to talk about that today, but I just sort of wanted that out there because it's a pretty clear indication that health insurance costs continue to be problematic, and that other parts of our budget essentially are supposed to suffer because of that.
Any other questions or thoughts? But I think I'm at a place where I think I just wanted to introduce this topic, talk at a very high level about it. I'm around this week if board members need or want, to walk through the spreadsheet, the either instructions from the governor's office and finance and management, or, through the line items to understand how that breakdown actually works. But I think we can revisit this topic and give more airtime to it at the next board meeting. Great. Oh,
Thank you,
Kirsten, go ahead.
Rachel. Oh,
Sorry.
Kirsten.
Can I just ask one final question that is kind of like the
Yeah.
overarching and speaks a little bit to what Alex is pointing out. So there's a sentence in the instructions that says general fund allotments will be provided to offset increases above 5%. So that general fund allotment, are we interpreting that would be from the land use review board budget or some other allotment?
I think,
Or do we know?
well, I would need to take a look at the instructions, but in the past several years, we have gotten a Pay Act appropriation, which happens at the end of the fiscal year. That's a general fund appropriation to accommodate increased expenditures. And in past fiscal years, when healthcare costs have increased substantially year over year, and those were not estimated within the budget because the instructions from finance and management dictated not to, like that you would forecast a 5% increase, but we've seen increases of 15 or more % in the past several years. And we've been granted a Pay Act appropriation near the end of the fiscal year. Again, that's a general fund appropriation to offset those costs. So I think it's something that we can, talk about with finance and management, but I would think that it would be similar to previous years, how this would be handled operationally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a very significant detail in the end. So thank you for
But
the
the
explanation
Pay
and the
Act-
history.
The Pay Act adjustment is a regular occurrence that
Mhm.
accounts for that.
Yeah, regardless, the instructions from finance and management dictate model it at 5%, which, the software that they give to all state agencies to be able to model this information does. So I'm not sure that it would affect our line items. I think that it would have to be reconciled in a different way. It's, does that make sense? And Pay Act has been the vehicle in the past.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think that we can expect that suddenly Pay Act disappears. So it's it's part of the process.
Okay, well, thanks for the thoughts. Thanks for the air. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say thank you because I think this is a challenging circumstance that we're in. There's new software that you're contending with a lot of the interim exemptions, and then looking at the tiers of revenues going down. absorbing those positions are, expenses are going up. There aren't too many places to be creative. And so thank you for walking us all as newbies through all of this, providing the historical perspective and moving the needle on some of these other things in terms of consolidation that have been gradually happening over the years. So thank you, Rachel.
Mhm. We'll
Yeah,
talk
thanks,
more
Rachel.
next week.
All right. Pete, do you want to take on legislative fix conversation?
Yeah, let's start that conversation. So it is posted on the board's webpage, and you all received a copy as well. Some last minute additions there, so apologies for the late notice on some of that. But we have a list of various legislative proposals, and I'll start out right. These are all very draft form, and are not positions of the board in any way at this point, but a good starting point. It's a collection of various items that you all have given to me, things that we've heard from others. Some reflect some ongoing legislation that just hasn't made it past the finish line previously, and so it's a vast collection of different potential proposals. So like to start that conversation a little bit, but let me start just to kind of level set in terms of legislative processes here. We are in the second year of a biennium, so that with that comes some different drafting deadlines for the House and Senate members, just to kind of have a sense of that. Generally, it's a little bit earlier in the second biennium. So draft requests, I think, for the House to get to the Legislative Council office is sometime prior to December. Any legislators that are listening, don't take this advice, but as advice, there's not an official schedule out there yet. I did look at the website, but I think under their rules that it's something in that range. And then very similar on the Senate side as well. So that will sort of, the nice thing about being in the second year of a biennium is it sort of sets the stage of the known universe of legislation that is out there. Of course, there's exceptions and ways to get things moving and attached to other bills as needed, but it does sort of, again, sort of define that universe a little bit more discreetly for us all as we're working through this too. So kind of working backward from there, I think this is a good time for us to be discussing proposals that the board might want to move forward. We can, after a few discussions here, I think the idea would be to have a sort of set group of proposals that the board strongly supports, and identifying those items that on the list that we're either not opposing, or there's other partners that are working on, or that we would oppose for one reason or another, and not move those forward kind of as a legislative priority. So try to identify those legislative priorities. I don't think we'll get that to that level today, but I just wanted to set kind of where we're going with that process.
Also, Pete,
Yeah, go ahead.
so one of the ways to look at these is, what is just a true fix versus a policy shift or a major policy thrust, right? And some of them in this list that we've compiled are simple corrections to what is in statute currently. And so those would be the ones I think that would be the easiest to move forward on at this point. So.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different vehicles, and thanks for mentioning that, because there's for technical corrections, so that's kind of your lowest hanging fruit, things that, hey, there's just something that is incorrect about the way that the wording is and doesn't make sense. For instance, you'll see one of the items there is just simply a missing preposition that needs to be there to make the sentence make sense. It's just just, there's not any political side of any of that or policy side of any of that. The next kind of level I see is sort of like a policy tweak. It might be, it seems to be going the change that is needed is just something that needs to take an existing policy decision that's already been made and make it clear, but could be interpreted as, a little bit of a change in the policy. And so want to kind of identify that. And then the third category is what I would call as a policy shift, where you maybe the policy was in one direction and this moves it into another direction. Again, kind of those are outlined in terms of ease to more difficult potentially. Not necessarily if you've got all the agreement, but generally that's kind of how I look at that. I'll mention here too that we have, again, just to reiterate, this is all very draft language. There's opportunity to add and subtract, of course, to this list. What I've done with the list is kind of categorized it into different types of items, as you can see. Happy to do a quick screen share of this too.
Yeah, probably a good idea if we're going to start being more specific.
Yeah, let me get my cursor and.
Or if you want, I can put it up, Pete.
Sure, yeah, that'd actually be really helpful. Then I'm not juggling between both the Teams meeting and the
sorry.
document.
I thought I had it open, but I don't. So hold on.
Here, I've got it open.
Oh, you
at
do?
least we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I can at
I'm
least start if you want to take
I'm looking
over
at it
and-
on my screen. I can share it right now.
Okay.
Oh, great, that'd be awesome.
Go ahead,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Yeah, we'll do.
Save my juggling.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So Pete, you were
what
saying
I've
you
done here-
categorize them.
Yes, exactly. So on the left-hand side, you can see that the category, I've put rows there just so we can talk about specific items easily. And then the categories there on the left-hand side just kind of outline the overall broad area that legislative change would be. So it starts kind of with those operational changes, which involves some staffing items as well. Nope, take that back. Staffing I took out separately. Got some changes about our fees, staffing, the interim housing exemptions.
Peter or
Veterans
Alex,
rate.
can you scroll down as he scrolls down? Yeah, fees, staffing. Keep scrolling.
Could you
Interim
also make it,
exemptions.
Alex, could you make it full screen? We're cutting off the right-hand columns.
Yeah, it gets a little bit small here too. Sorry for that. It's a lot of information in a tight
Okay,
place here.
enforcement.
So yeah, and then enforcement.
And
AOFB is part of an existing legislation that's out there. I'll pause there for a second. So your hand come up, Sarah, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you want questions as we go? Do you want to just get through this? What's your preference?
let's just scroll
Yeah,
through
just-
quickly to show the categories and then we can start discussing individuals.
Yeah,
So,
that'd
go
be
ahead.
great. And I recognize that not everybody has seen this or had a lot of time with it too. So just wanted to orient everybody. Transportation impacts, appeals, kind of placeholders on both of those studies and potential legislation that would come out of each of those. The wood products manufacturing that was identified, 3 areas within that report. Those are categorized here. A number of items then following that on the tiers of jurisdiction and how those would operate, which flows then into the future land use plan and the maps and changes related to that. And then one on regional plans and the PHPs. So why don't we, start at the top, and again, kind of, as a starting point today, I'd love to get people's general reactions, what you're looking for, where we want to prioritize a little bit, and we can certainly go through things a little bit more line by line over the next couple of weeks or so. But go ahead, Sarah.
First of all, thank you, Pete. This is a lot. I think we've been throwing a lot at you as we go, so thank you. I think you collected a lot of it, and it's amazing that we're at 50. Yes, 52. And so I have one to add and maybe one to subtract. I think just generally overall, what would be helpful too is if we did have a column that we could do technical fix versus broader to help sort. I think that would be great. I have a couple of comments on 23, 25, and I think 45, but I don't know if you want to wait and if somebody has something before that, or if you want me to just throw at you what I have.
Just go with what you've got, and
Okay.
Alex will scroll to line 23 to start.
All right, so part of this is the tier 1A conversation for later. But I think that first one is the authority to enforce transferred permits. I know our legal team right now is looking into some of this, so I'm not sure that we have a fully baked fix or ask right now. So I think it's great to sort of note that, but perhaps not have a specified ask until we get some further detail on that. 25 is the VTrans study that was required under section 37A of Act 181, which is ongoing right now, which we don't have an ask for, and I feel very uncomfortable specifying anything at this time, because I think we need to wait for the results of that study and work with VTrans on what their recommendation is going to be. So that's one that perhaps we could at this time delete the potential fix and just say that is waiting for the results of this study that's required per 37A. I think there are a couple of great things on getting clarification on tier 1A, and also asking for more time, which I appreciate. I think the one thing that I'd love to add, that's sort of another clarification of tier 1A, is adding back in somewhere in state statute the definition of smart growth principles that's scheduled to go away in 2034. So it's the definition under 24 VSA section 2791.13. So that definition is that definition, because it's referred to in 6034, gets put back in someplace. I don't have a specific area for that. I know that there are some really great legal thinkers out there that perhaps have a few different areas where that might want to go in 24 VSA, but just that in 2034 we could have a reference to smart growth that doesn't have the definition that's in it right now. So I think that's hopefully is a technical fix more so than a substantial one. That's what I have
Sarah,
right now.
wasn't
Thank
there,
you.
didn't you call out another line item though? 50 something? What'd you say?
45 maybe?
45?
So 45 is
Oh, that was the
asking for
increase in
more
time,
time
right?
Oh, okay.
on tier 1A, and that was just something that I was thankful that's added in. I think that's a great help, and I think also I use that as a sort of segue into another help would be having a definition retained that's also referenced under the tier 1A process. So
Okay, thanks.
sorry to add to the list, but thank you.
No, I think the smart growth
Yeah,
oversight.
before.
I think others are
before-
thinking about that too, so I think it makes sense to have it on our list.
And
Alex?
before we move on,
Oh,
I'm just
sorry,
gonna,
Pete.
address, just one thing, on the, whether it's a technical fix or a policy tweak or a policy shift. I have sort of recommendations on those, but one person's policy tweak might be another person's, technical correction or policy shift, right? So, but I'm happy to, share kind of that information with the board too. At least my first go around on it.
Alex, go ahead.
So my suggestions, I wasn't really gonna go line by line. But more generally, I think that adding the column, Pete, that you just mentioned, I think you should do that. I would encourage you to do that. And I think we need another column. Sorry, it makes for a more unwieldy spreadsheet, but I think we need a priority column or a biennium column or something, because to be perfectly honest, there are way too many suggested changes on this list to try to put forward for the coming legislative session, whether they're tweaks or policy shifts or otherwise. So we need to I think we need to pare this down substantially. And if we had a priority column, it would be empty, at the front end. But when we go through these, we could talk about like, yeah, that's a top priority, or that's a 2026 legislative session priority. It could be just a binary choice between, is this something we want to ask for in the coming session or something we want to ask for in the next biennium that starts in 2027. So think about whether adding those two columns would be helpful. I think they would be. And yeah, that's my overall comment, is when I went through the whole list, I thought there's lots of good stuff in here, but it's way too much. We're not going to get a legislator on board to make that level of substantive changes in the second half of a biennium.
Right, and that was never expected to come from this, Alex.
I got you. I just wanted to be clear about that. Two other
Yeah.
things. One, I know there are other entities that are also working on their own list. I believe, Pete, we had talked to the VAPTA representatives from the regional planning commissions. So not for today, obviously, but at some point it'd be nice to see their list or see what is on their list that's not on ours, so we can think about that.
So
And
Alex, they have told us that they intend to work on a list, and should be working it up within the next few weeks, and do want to compare and contrast. So we'll be doing that with them too.
the only line item I would mention is the first one. I think we just need to give up on that, at least for the 2026 session. I think that's been asked and answered, and it doesn't serve us to keep talking about it right now, which is the open meeting law changes.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Alex. Sarah.
So I like seeing all the raw ingredients going in, so I'm going to ask that we keep this detailed sheet for a while. Obviously, I think to what Alex was trying to convey is there's a way of packaging that is going to need to be done before this goes someplace, in terms of these are things that we need immediately. The one that I enumerated doesn't need to really get changed until a little bit before 2034, but it's great to have this list. I once was a keeper of a list like this for legislative changes that was amended from year to year, and it was always like someplace and was always very long. You can't get to all of them, but it's great to have this list. So thank you, and just don't pare it down too much for right now, because I think there's going to be another version that packages differently, but it's great to have this level of detail. So thank you.
So I think with added, priority and maybe some other columns, that we can sort this, and we can, put the highest priority on a separate sheet, and that's, that's our high priority sheet. So we can do some sorting with some added columnar detail.
Yeah, I wanted to add that. I agree, Sarah. I made it sound like we should be taking things off because they're not likely to happen. We shouldn't take anything off unless we think it's completely never going to be taken up by us or anyone else. I agree. We should keep the whole list, but add some columns so we can prioritize and have the cream rise to the top.
Yeah, don't fear. I won't lose the list. And I will keep it fully. And yeah, kind of the way that I organize things is by legislative year, and then kind of go back to it as we need to. But we'll keep it available.
Any other board comments at this point? We have 4 more minutes. Brooke, and then we'll go to Annette.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to look at this in any detail. I've eyeballed it, and I do think there are some pretty heavy duty policy decisions involved in some of these suggestions, which, while okay, there's nothing wrong with putting it on a list, I don't think that they would be something we would have the capacity to address for several years. So, and particularly like with regard to abandonment of permits and expiration dates, that's a pretty fundamental change to Act 250. So I just want to mention that I'm not sure that that's our job. Our job is to implement the statute, and we have been asked to study things and to change things and to work on tier jurisdiction. And I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong, but I wonder where the limits of our policymaking ends. And I think that we should keep that in mind, that we are not the legislature. And while I think that it's incumbent upon us to administer this program, and if there are ways to improve efficiency, I think that's very important. To bring in line some of the pieces and parts of Act 181 that may be a red flag, that it might not work so well, and we may be able to improve it. But I think that we should be very cautious about addressing fundamental changes to Act 250, such as further exemptions or we don't want jurisdiction anymore. So I'm not sure that that is really our job.
Thank you, Brooke. Kirsten. Oh, sorry, Annette, can you hold off just till we hear from board, and then I'll call on you.
Sure.
Kirsten.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, some of what's already been said. It's a long list. It makes sense to bifurcate it into like technical, non-technical things that the board does want to, it's put forward some initiative on this upcoming session. I haven't really had a chance to go through it in detail, but I was also going to note, something similar along the lines of what Brooke just said, that this is a pretty big spectrum of, somewhat benign, sort of correct technical corrections to pretty substantive kind of policy questions. And like Brooke, I'm not sure that is our role on those sort of bigger policy issues. So look forward to discussion. And just quickly, I did, item 25 that Sarah talked about, the transportation mitigation topic. I think it's good to keep it on a list somewhere, but absolutely agree. We need to continue, letting AOT advance its work under Act 181 and get to a place where everyone understands what a recommendation might be. We're just not there yet. So
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks for keeping track of all this, Pete. I'm sure that there will be things that get added, come off, you know, you mentioned that VAPTA is going to have a list. You know, if we really get going with this kind of thing, I'm sure others will too. Now they'll come in and say, could you do this? Could you do that? So we want to be careful how we approach our role in all of this.
Thank you, Kirsten. Annette?
Good afternoon. I wanted to offer a caution about number 5 and the changing of the name. You may recall that the Public Service Board changed its name to the Public Utility Commission. People are still confused about the two entities. However, the background on that is that during the Shumlin administration, the Commissioner of Public Service decided to change the name of the Department of Public Service to the Public Service Department. So there was a Public Service Department and a Public Service Board, which led to even greater confusion over the next 5 years. And that's when the Public Service Board changed its name to the Public Utility Commission to try and distinguish itself from the Public Service Department. I can see the same thing happening here if you go to the Land Use Commission and then you have a Land Use Board. I would think long and hard about giving up a 50-year name of the District Environmental Commission and just leave it at that, because while I understand somebody's thinking on how this would align with the Land Use Board name, the public will be just more confused, and you need to keep the distinction. And I have not had a chance to get past number 5 on the list, but I do think that one of the things that I am kind of expecting you to do in going back to the legislature, and I don't know if some of these things are on the list or not, is that my impression is that you are running into certain things that were in the Act 181 that you need to go back to the legislature and say, this isn't working, you need to fix it. That to me would be the top priority, sort of aligned with what Brooke was saying, is that you have been tasked with a lot of very complicated things to do, and not all of them are going to work or be effective. And there may be ways to improve it or eliminate things, but that's really what I'm hoping to see you go back to the legislature with in this half of the biennium. I think that they will be receptive to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. I would totally agree with you on that point, and I feel like what our priorities should be are those things that we've encountered as we've moved through our work in the last 8 months, where we see that there is a little problem or there needs to be some clarification in order for us to keep moving forward without questions. So that brings us to our next agenda item. So I think you can stop sharing, Alex. Thank you for doing that. And we are now at studies and reports. We have a Tier 1A draft application guidelines, continued conversation, and continued appeals discussion. So Sarah, do you want to start?
Happy to. I'll share my screen and I'll turn off my camera so I can avoid hopefully crashing like I did last Monday. That was unusual, but hopefully not to be replicated. All right, hopefully everybody can see the screen.
Yes.
So I'm happy to, we did get through everything. There was a little bit rushed toward the end. But there are a couple of conversations that I wanted to specifically focus on today to get additional feedback. And Brooke, I'm also happy to go to some different places, recognizing that this is your first crack at this draft. One of the things that I didn't get a clear read from the board on last week was the pre-application process. I think there's a little bit of dissension because state statute requires us to have a pre-application meeting, but not necessarily an application. And I think this is a great segue from the previous conversation. We can ask for restructuring of how our time clock goes with reviewing applications. But right now, the way that's specified is we have 45 days from the receipt of an application to issue findings, which is not very much. So the concept is to have a more robust pre-application process at this time, so that hopefully by the time we get the application, everybody is working from the same playing field. If there are any objections or concerns, they're known about, anticipated, and addressed as best as possible. So I think what I was hoping to just sort of initially seek from the board today was some feedback in terms of a more robust pre-application process or a more streamlined pre-application process. I heard both voices from the board last week, but was just hoping to hear more.
So I think Alex and I had our reactions to that question last week, and Kirsten, I don't know if you've thought further, and Brooke, whether you have thoughts you want to put forth. Go ahead, Brooke.
I would let others speak, but nobody's nobody's raising their hand. I listened to the tape of our last meeting and chatted a little bit with Sarah about this. You know, I appreciate the positions on both sides. I think I tend to be more in Alex's camp with less formality. But I understand, you know, the desire to want to front load and make sure that things can be addressed ahead of time. I think for me, it's the bringing in of the other parties maybe that I think steps it up to a different level. And is that necessary? I mean, that seemed to be one of the components of the differences in the review, is like, oh, let's get everybody involved earlier on, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, I think you're understanding that. Would you agree, Sarah?
Yes, I think the concept is these are all entities that are going, I'm just going to scroll down to that. These are all entities that are going to be notified of the application. They too will have a very limited amount of time to comment. And one of the hopeful things with involving them early on is to ensure that if there are any issues, that the municipality is notified of them as soon as possible in the process, and they're brought in, and hopefully there's a resolution before the application is submitted. You know, it could be a best practice, and I think the tough thing with building the plane and flying it and not knowing what sort of turbulence we're going to hit is this is I will say overly prescriptive. And I would hope that as we get a few in, we can be a little bit less prescriptive, but just trying to take all the good housekeeping to ensure that that application process is as smooth as possible. But you're right, we could, these are entities that are not required to be notified. This could come out at this point.
Sarah, would there be a way to sort of involve their feedback or input in more of a screened way, so that you're still preserving the informality of the meeting, and you know, you're not like 10 people aren't there, you know, in a big meeting? Because I'm trying to contemplate how this would actually work. So yes, we want your feedback early on, but not make it like everybody has to meet or be involved in the actual meeting.
So the pre-application meeting doesn't involve necessarily any of the formal approving that you do with a regional plan. So it's a little bit less formal than that. But I think the idea of what was structured here is that you could have any of these entities just verbally participating in that meeting as opposed to providing written comments. I worry about sacrificing one for the other and saying that to our different sister agencies at the state that they have to only provide formal written comment. I think that goes to the more formal, rather than just giving them the opportunity to show up and state what their concerns are at the pre-application meeting.
You know, I could go either way. If you feel like it would be better to do the front loading and involve folks, and then if you find out it becomes cumbersome, you know, like you said, we can adjust the process. I'm sorry, I'm a fence sitter.
That's okay. I don't feel excessively strongly about a pre-application. I just feel like it's in everybody's best interest to front load this information. And in the end, at the end of this pre-application meeting, basically the board is going to say, okay, you're ready to make an application. Okay, you're not ready. So go back and try again. So that, I mean, is as formal, I think, as the board has to be at this point with this. And
One of the, sorry, Jen, if you want to finish your.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of the things, and I can absolutely see it both ways. I struggle with of putting myself in the applicant's shoes is I think mine, for better or for worse, is I'd like to know. I'd like to have the information in hand as soon as possible in the process. I'd like to know what I'm contending with moving forward. And so I think that's what this process does, for better or for worse. I can see it from both sides though, and I wish that we had more staff and more resources to have a lot of the great informal conversations that you had with the downtown board and the downtown board staff that would come in and have some courtesy meetings that were less formal. I would like to say, and maybe this is more in the FAQ or the application guide, is I would like to just, as a board member, try and accommodate that as best as possible without obligating our staff. That's something with the first few of these tier ones is I'm absolutely going to make myself available to sit down with applicants and answer questions, assist them in any way that I can. I do like the idea of having that sort of more hands-on helpful process, which I believe is what the tier 1A pre-application was originally designed for. So I'd love to also get us more formally back to that once we've had the first few, but this process, I think I was trying to ensure that applicants would have all the information in hand as soon as they could in the process.
Alex.
There a technical question that's related to this conversation or decision point. The notice, as it's constructed in the guidelines the draft guidelines that you put together right now, the notice happens at the pre-application phase. Does it need to happen again at the application phase? Because it was my understanding that the notice provisions in the statute refer to notice to specific parties when an application is filed, not a pre-application. So would we need to, I'm not sure that this is a deal breaker, but would we need to duplicate the notice and essentially do it both during the pre-application and at the application phase?
So there are two interesting things here. The first is we're not doing the noticing, the municipality is. If you take a look at what's in state statute, the onus is on the municipality as the applicant to notice all these entities, and it's only required for the application process. So legally, we are required to have them all notified by the municipality for the application, not the pre-application.
So the simple answer is yes, it would need to happen at the application time horizon.
Yes.
Correct.
But we don't do it.
I understand that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying using the royal we. Is that a thing? I'm not sure. But in any case, my other technical question is under the application review, I think it's section 2.203. It talks about some of the timelines. This tripped me up when I first commented on the draft, Sarah, which you noticed. So the statute says that we're supposed to issue a decision within 45 days of receiving the application, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
but this says that the board will hold a public, under 2.203A, says the board will hold a public hearing not more than 45 days from the application, from the date the application is deemed complete. So we have to fix that, right? We can't hold the hearing 45 days. We have to make a decision 45 days from when it's complete.
Correct, but
Okay.
yes,
This
I'm not sure
speaks
that
to
there's-
why you want to front load things, and I get that.
Right.
A little more so now.
we could shorten that to something different other than the 45 days, but I think that just allowing us, we have 45 days to issue a decision. And you're right,
but
we probably
but
want to
what
have
Alex
that.
is saying is that this is requiring us to hold a public hearing no more than 45 days. So really, we should be holding this public hearing probably no more than 30 days. If that, maybe no more than 21 days. But
Right,
anyway.
but then there's that next line about at least 35 days prior to the public
right,
hearing.
we would have to change that as well.
Well, that's in state statute, so that I can't change. I can change the 45 days from the date of the application. But
We have
it's all
to, so
relatively tight.
maybe, wow, we have to notify of the public hearing 35 days prior. And so that gives us 10 days to
right.
hold a
That's
hearing and issue a decision.
That's the technical correction that's needed when that
Yeah.
we were talking about earlier. But I
Yeah,
was just sort of pointing out I think we have a change we need to make in that 2.203A, and also had the question about notice. This doesn't really change the calculus about the key question that we were just discussing, that Brooke was trying to provide some feedback on, which is, do we want an informal pre-application process, or do we want a more robust one?
Kirsten,
So I've thought about this a little bit more, and I'm not stuck on any. I mean, I guess I have a couple kind of overarching questions, and maybe this is gonna sound like sort of a dumb one, but I'll just throw it out there. My understanding is that the application doesn't, like the proposal from the RPC doesn't, the application proposal doesn't have to match the pre-application. That the whole, one of the purposes of the pre-application is to get feedback from everyone, including the board. And, I think it's good to bring people in early and get feedback, informally. But I also think we have to be careful that the pre-application doesn't start to look like or become some kind of substitute for the application. And so with that, I'm wondering, I'm understanding they don't have to match. Like, the RPC comes in, they get some feedback, maybe they make some modifications, and now they feel ready to come in with their formal application submittal. But is
Kirsten,
one scenario?
Kirsten.
Oh, go ahead.
You keep saying RPC, but this is actually a municipal.
Oh, that's right, municipality.
application.
Municipality.
Just so that people out
they
there aren't
can-
confused when they listen
Yeah,
to the tape.
sorry.
We're talking about municipal
Yes.
applications.
1A.
Okay, sorry
But
to interrupt. Go
They
ahead.
can, so if let's say they come in with a pre-application and they get substantive feedback and they huddle and decide they want to make some changes to their tier 1A submittal, can they do a second pre-application? Like, I would think that
Yes.
we would welcome that.
Yes.
And continue to get feedback until they're ready to more formally submit the application.
So you are correct on both fronts. The pre-application does not need to meet the application. As a matter of fact, would be great. That would be awesome if somebody took the pre-application, modified it, addressed everybody's concerns, and came in with an application that was different. And even to that end, the boundaries might change between a pre-application and application, because there aren't specific requirements regarding the pre-application the way that there are with the regional plans. So that's the first thing, is you're correct on that, and that's great. Second thing is, I was talking with, I think it was Maddie or Alex P, about numbering. And yes, you could have multiple pre-applications. There's no fee involved. You could come in several times and say, hey, we're not quite there yet. We wanted to get additional feedback. What do you think? With the first few of these, that would be absolutely appropriate. Is you might have a few that really want to take that process to make sure that by the time that they come in with the application, they're coming in with the best application possible.
Okay, thanks. I think it's the pre-application strikes me as, you know, having greater importance due in part to the tight timelines that we have to follow for the application component. So,
I think what
yeah,
I'm hearing from you and from the board at this point is I'm going to leave this as is for right now. We can continue to mull this over. As I said, this is going to be reiterative, and I'll be bringing this in to you again. I think just for the sake of time, I do want to jump to a different section, but Brooke, did you have anything that you wanted me to look at specifically today?
I'm good. I'm following along.
Okay.
And
Caught up
I
from
might
last
just
time,
add
thanks.
that, you know, until and unless we get that fix where we have, you know, more than 10 days in between the public hearing and issuing a determination, that that the pre-application is more important, and getting that upfront information uploaded or front-loaded information is more important. And I think as you look at this again, Sarah, maybe just look at those pre-application requirements and see if there's anywhere that they can be, you know, made a little less formal. I know that this closely followed the regional plan application, pre-application guidance, but maybe there are ways that we can make it a little less formal.
I already have a different version started with a lot of the suggestions from the board and as well as staff. So absolutely. I think the other thing that I'll jump to is the 2.3, which is the review of status. And some of this was mentioned in the legislative update and changes. So in statute right now, there's the ability for the land use review board to enforce if a municipality isn't, but it's not very clear how that happens. And barring a legislative fix to provide clarity, I think that would come under our review of status. And so the review of status and sort of thinking this through and trying to flesh it out, and this is still very much under construction, but I wanted to at least spend a little bit more time educating the board on what some of the thinking is behind this. We're required under state statute to check in every 4 and then 8 years. This is not a renewal process. This continues on. So there's also the ability for the board at any time to ask for a municipality to come back. And I want to make it very clear that there's the ability for a municipality to ask for a review of status. So if you had a municipality that took over Tier 1A and felt it was too much and wanted to have a conversation about giving it back, that would be that process. So this is the area that isn't very much spelled out or prescribed to us that is worth some additional thinking around. The other thing is we could prescribe in some of the conditions of the first Tier 1A conditions that we ask for them to come back with a review of status more frequently than the 4 years. But so within this, we're thinking of giving a municipality a bit of time, 60 or 90 days to prepare for a review of status and to come in and tell us what they've been doing in terms of enforcement or amending permits. And then after this, and we are going to do this as a public hearing, because if we were amending or revoking or putting on notice a Tier 1A community, I think it would be in our best interest to do this formally in a hearing process. And so the scope of the review then gets into, we could either affirm the determination, so great, thumbs up, everything's going well. we could amend the tier 1A determination to maybe put an additional condition on or requirement, or maybe relieve or remove a previous condition that they've met. We could require corrective action for a municipality within a reasonable time frame, so that would address the lacking the enforcement. Or we could terminate the tier 1A determination. And so just thinking through a bit about how we would do that, and that we would then issue findings again. This would be sort of like an amendment for an existing Act 250 permit, whether it be a -1 or -2, that would go to the original determination. So I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time. I sort of flew through this last week, and I just wanted to come and bring this back, particularly in light of some of the legislative discussion. I'm happy to go through this a little more or answer questions, but again, very much sort of a work under construction.
Can I just, go ahead, Alex.
I just want to reiterate what I think I said last time, which is, Sarah, I think this is I think you did a really good job with this section. I don't know that I would have thought of it, and you did, and I like the way you structured it. Yeah, my only piece of constructive criticism at all is that I guess it would be in 2.306, which is issuing a determination either in A or B, just giving us a time deadline to issue it once the hearing's been held. I don't think that's in there right now, and I think it'd be good to hold us to a deadline, not 10 days like the other ridiculous statutory thing, but perhaps 30 days from the close or something like that.
Good catch.
There is within 7 days from the close, the recommendation must be submitted to the full board under B.
Yeah,
there.
But that's just the designee's recommendation. Then,
Yeah.
Technically an indecisive board could sit on it for 6 months and issue
True.
the determination way late. But otherwise, I really like the section, Sarah. Well done.
Thank you.
Brooke, are you gonna need half an hour for appeals?
Oh, goodness, no, 5 minutes.
Oh, is that all? Okay, so we
Yes,
could
just one
spend more
issue.
time on this, Sarah, if you feel the need. Kirsten,
So, the 4-year interval or more frequently, if, should it be necessary, status reports. I guess I'm not clear on in the Act 181 statute, if we, as part of that, have the authority to modify the tier 1A area as part of that status review. I don't know if and sorry I didn't catch you before the meeting, Sarah, but I just want to make sure that that's within the scope of authority as part of that status review process. Because to me, like, checking in on status is more assessing, what's already been put forward and any terms and conditions, et cetera, and how's it working. And it's sort of related to, but also sort of partly a different topic as to changing the scope of the area in question that could, for example, invoke some different requirements or conditions that the board would assess in terms of, looking at the land use of a potential expansion, let's say. So could you talk me through a little bit how you envision that would work and what our authority is?
Sure. Janet, do you want to?
I was just gonna say our authority is not crystal clear, of course, in statute. And what it says is if at any time the board determines that the tier 1A area no longer meets the standards for the status, it shall take one of the following actions: require corrective action within a reasonable time frame, or terminate the status. And so the question is, what is requiring corrective action involve, and whether it might involve changing the boundary. But I would think that if a municipality is coming and asking for additional area that hasn't already been approved for status, that's a new application. So if the board determines that, I think this municipality would be fine as long as the tier 1A area doesn't include this. And so if they took it down to just their center, just to their village center, they'd be fine. But they can't include the planned growth area or something like that, or I mean the village area. It seems to me that the guidance that Sarah's working on could lead us to that kind of option.
Yeah, I think that, there's not a lot of specificity to work with. And so I think that we have within this, barring any specificity, some ability to offer some flexibility in interpretation. I think that one of the things that I was contemplating was if you had a regional plan that came in and the underlying flu area was contracted or expanded, and they're called into question, therefore, the limits of the tier 1A area, is that this is a process by which the board or the municipality could activate and ask for a conversation with the board about how this is going to, is there a corrective action? So I would love some additional specificity at some point, but until that time, I think we'll go with our best interpretation. Perhaps somewhere to add in is, what is an amendment? Is it a new application? At what point is a correction cross the threshold? So that's an area that maybe we do want to create a definition around.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And I think that it might be a good idea to do that as part of this application guideline document. Maybe not, if we're trying to get this out so that it gets used in the first instance, that's fine, but at least put a pin in it and be able to come back to it and incorporate that important element that inevitably is going to come up, right? People, towns are going to come in, they're going to get this status, it's going to be mapped out, and then they want to change it, expand it, move it, and so what do we do?
Well,
what does that
I mean,
look
I
like?
think it's clear that an expansion is a new application. It's not a review of status, but I don't know, maybe we
I think
disagree.
where it lacks some clarity is if that happens as part of a regional plan flu map amendment. So no fault to the municipality, a regional plan comes in and contracts a flu area, and then there's less planned growth area. Therefore, they lose the eligibility under some of their community for tier 1A. To put them back through the whole entire process to contract an area, I'm not sure is warranted. So I think that we can spell out some scenarios. But again, I don't think that there is a lack of definition, unfortunately, of how to treat that.
Okay, if it's understood to be quite clear that if there's an expansion, that expansion area would get reviewed again under a successive application, that maybe we don't need to put that detail in here. It just having it in that status report sort of was a bit confusing to me, but thank you for explaining to me, Sarah, that it was really meant to capture, for example, the changes in the future land use areas that might occur. So I'm good.
Alex?
On that same topic, I think Kirsten raises a good point, and it feels like either, like you said, Sarah, it's something that can be addressed in a definition, or just adding another section to the guidance document, perhaps ahead of the 2.3 that says amending status, right? So there's review of status. You could have a section that simply says amending status and very quickly explains that when a municipality is interested in amending a Tier 1A application, that any expansion requires an application and a full review, whereas any contraction, perhaps we could send it through, something akin to the review of status. Because I think, Sarah, what you helped me understand was that these designations don't go away unless we take them away. So
Yeah, we're the ones.
it's on us. Like municipality should not have to initiate a corrective action to like contract their Tier 1A area because of a regional plan change. Like, that's on us to do that. The only time a municipality is going to be in front of us is if they want to do the two things Kirsten mentioned, which is expand or shift in some way. And maybe we just have a section that says, amending status, and we address that in a couple of pet sentences or in definitions. Either way, I think it's a good catch, Kirsten.
Okay. Sarah, do you have other areas that you'd like input on today?
No, I think this has been very helpful. I'm so very appreciative. I'm going to stop sharing for right now unless anybody else has any other comments, but I just, let me turn my camera back on. No, I appreciate the group think on these because it's, there's these areas that are very specific under 6034 and then there are areas that are not. And so I'm going to continue working on this and hopefully bring this back to the board at a future time yet to be determined, and just happy to hear your thoughts also in the interim and offline. So thank you.
Any further comment on the Tier 1A guidelines as they are currently drafted and discussed? Thomas?
Okay, we're unmuted.
All right. Thank you. This is Thomas Weiss, Montpelier again. I've got a few comments that I've been working on. I haven't quite gotten them ready. Relating, and I'll send you some comments. I plan to do it tomorrow. But there are some requirements that are in Chapter 117 that I don't think are addressed in these guidelines relating to enforcement requirements of municipalities and the transfer of conditions of Act 250 permits into municipal permits. And I think they ought to be covered. So when a community submits the bylaws for a Tier 1A application, they should already have the requirements of how do they handle transferring conditions from an Act 250 permit into the municipal permit into those guidelines as part of the application for Tier 1A status. And it came to me that as soon as you make the Tier 1A designation, the municipalities have the ability, need to be totally ready for the Tier 1A responsibilities that they're taking on. And another question I think Alex had asked it either last week or the week before was, do we provide the municipalities with a list of the Act 250 permits in the Tier 1A areas, or do we have them do that? And I think that the municipality should do that. It will be partly a demonstration of their capacity and ability to understand what they're getting into with the enforcement. It also would require the board to make sure that all of the permits in those Tier 1A areas are on the Act 250 database so the municipalities can find them. I don't know the status of all the transfers of documents and projects onto the Act 250 database. So those are some of my thoughts. I've taken a little more time than I wanted to. And as I said, I'll plan to put them into writing and send them off to you hopefully tomorrow.
Thank you, Thomas. Sarah, you have a quick off the top of your head reaction?
Yep. So I think Thomas hit on a spot that I've identified that statute is not very helpful about. So there is a bit of a disconnect between the 24 VSA 4460 G and H about how a municipality administers and enforces, and then the application requirements of 10 VSA 6034. So that's an area that is going to need to be in a separate FAQ. Because the 4460 we can't necessarily require within the application requirements, I believe. We're still work in progress. Legal is still reviewing this. We will have an answer for that at some point in the future. But right now we have some really great questions identified that we don't necessarily have all the full answers for. And what I would say is back this past spring, I did do an FAQ about how municipalities that were interested in Tier 1A could research it. And I think a lot of those communities already begun to research to identify at least sort of a quantity of how many Act 250 permits they're dealing with. But again, in talking with our staff and recognizing that we've made some really great strides with our database and digitizing, but it's not everything yet, is that at some point, maybe as part of that pre-application process, and this is again going to be more a pre-application guide, is that sort of first initial sit down is that we make sure that we are working with the same lists, that they are fully aware of how many permits that they would be taking on. So some things that perhaps aren't necessarily application requirements, but also some very helpful things to identify in terms of the education and onboarding process for some of these communities. So still very much a work in progress. Great questions. We're working on the answers. Thanks.
Okay. Any other discussion on Tier 1A guidelines as they are currently drafted? Kirsten.
I just want to quickly add to what Sarah said and mention that if the municipality wants to come up with a list of permits, that's great. But I definitely think that the Land Use Review Board and its staff would need to confirm that that's the list, like at some point of a process. It can be a bit of a research project to confirm the exact reach and extent of the land that is subject to any particular Act 250 permit. So it's just something that we would need to confirm.
Thank you.
Agreed.
All right, let's move on to appeal study discussion. Brooke.
Let me share my screen quickly. I have a burning question for the board. So I had the opportunity last week to meet with the judiciary. I met with Judge Zone and also Terry Corsones, our court administrator. Also had a meeting with Tom Little, our long-serving District 4 Commission chair. And last Friday, I had a drop-in, pop-in for the district coordinators. I know it was the day after their retreat, but got enough participation, so I was able to pick enough brains to come back to the board and tell you that, to look at the chart here, jurisdictional opinions was the focus of the conversation. And we had talked about requiring an on-the-record review because the rationale was that JOs are married to the facts that are presented to the district coordinator, and on a de novo review, things changed, sometimes to the point where you couldn't recognize the original JO. And so there was some concern that the proper vetting of the facts then was converted into a different inquiry. So we were trying to shorten the time by saying there's not going to be any other evidence. It's not going to be a new blank slate review. However, in talking with these other entities, The judiciary was very concerned because we were saying, gee, we were going to propose this for a board model. Is this something that you would be receptive to at the court? And there was concern expressed that two things, there's no hearing below, and there's also no formal record. And in fact, in conversing with the district coordinators, there is much diversity in terms of the formality and how much information and how it's provided to the district coordinator. It can be a phone call, it can be an email. Now, the district coordinators are good about specifying what the facts are, but I am absolutely convinced after these conversations and given the massive diversity of what can comprise the record and that there's no hearing, we should stick with de novo, not make any recommendation to change that. And in fact, for the board model, we should also adopt de novo for JOs as well. So that's my big change
Wait,
to our
sorry,
chart.
Brooke.
Mhm.
I thought we were just talking about JOs only.
Right. So the prior, this is the Act 250 cases, the district coordinator jurisdictional opinions, we cut again into complex and simple. So when we were talking before, we were talking about an on the record review. Take
Right.
whatever the record is and just decide it. So based on what my conversation was with the judiciary, as well as the district coordinators and Tom Little, because Tom Little said, you don't want to have it lawyered up at the JO level. You want to maintain the informality so that people can go to the district coordinator. So they have certainly convinced me, based on all this information, that we should stick with it. Right now it's de novo. And so the court, we're not going to recommend they change that, but we should also address those appeals the same way if they were to come to the board under our board model. We should give it a fresh look so that they don't have to formalize below, get a lawyer involved, and it allows whatever information to be submitted. Now, that's not to say that they can change the whole project. You know, when you get to the point where you're changing the material facts of a question, that's when you need to go back for a new JO from the district coordinator. But I think if we follow the model, they have not had any particular issues with it. The processing times are fairly short, much shorter on JOs than they are on permitting, of course. Alex?
Two questions, if I can keep them straight in my head here, Brooke. First, you're postulating for our recommendations in the study a third option, right, between on the record and de novo, the supplementary record review. Do you have any thoughts about whether JO appeals should be in that category, like what the pros and cons would be, as opposed to de novo?
Yeah, you know, it's about the record. Because some of these are so informal, it's an email, you know, and that's the record. And so I think that it's part that there is no hearing to review. It's one person's decision, but that the back and forth conversation may not be as easy as, you know, when you actually have a hearing and you're taking evidence and you have an Act 250 database with the application and the exhibits. This could be, you know, I can call up a district coordinator and say, hey, blah, 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 this is my thing, you know, and they might say, send me a quick email on it, because you would be shocked at how many decisions like that are made versus, you know, we have a very small number that's appealed. So it's the gamut, it's the continuum of a lawyer writing and sending exhibits and, you know, this is our site plan and this is all the stuff we're going to do, all the way to, hey, I'm thinking about building a house, you know, whatever it might be. So I'm trying to accommodate and not encumber the district coordinators to have to be always worrying about, oh my gosh, This is something that has to be saved. It's the record. It goes up on the appeal. I think we just give them a blank slate. Don't even make them package up a record. But it's
So-
the same request, of course.
Right. So what I'm getting from you is that the answer to my question is that there are not substantial pros from recommending that JO appeals be held to a supplemental record review standard, that de novo is the right standard. Even though you're suggesting we create this third one called supplemental record review. That's fine. My second question was, one of the parts that I liked about, I don't know if it was the supplemental record review, might have been, was our recommendation that we want to give more deference to the decision that was being appealed. And so I'm curious if we recommend that JO appeals be dealt with de novo in the way that they are today, do we sacrifice our ability to, or can we also still recommend that the legislature consider providing a bit more deference when they write the law to the original decision?
Right. And this is an area that's really important. And the district coordinators were asking me about that as well. So there's a difference here, and the columns of the chart might help to explain it. The type of appellate review is what documents you look at or what information that you're given. It is one way to think about it. So on a supplemental record review, we're going to get the record below, and then we're going to allow in other supplementary evidence. It's not duplicative, blah, blah, blah. Now, but the standard of review is a different thing. That is, how do you look at the decision below? Okay. And so one of the things that I need to come back to when I give you the draft next week, I'm trying to determine how to write that effectively into the rules to give that level of deference, of some level of deference. So the way to look at it is, okay, if the district coordinator made a decision that was factual, a question of facts, was there reasonable or substantial evidence? That's what the standard of review is. Even though you're giving the person a blank slate from an evidentiary perspective, you can put in anything you want this time around. You're still looking at the decision below, and unless there is something very awry about the facts, so long as they're reasonable conclusions, reasonable facts have been found, then that's giving some deference to below. Now, questions of law, that's what's going to be considered de novo. So the standard review is looking at it from the district coordinator's perspective to some extent and giving them deference on those facts. What do they find? They're finding that, you're too close to the buffer. Or, whatever it might be. I can't think of a good example. Yet the laws apply consistently. So that's how I'm trying to build in acknowledgement, and let's not throw it in the garbage heap. We want to keep the understanding or the analysis and conclusion to the extent that it's supportable.
Kirsten.
Brooke, if I may, I just wanted to quickly interject a minor clarification, or just make sure that people who may be listening to this are aware. The coordinators do compile a record for JOs that are issued, which, as you mentioned, may and sometimes be very limited to like an email with a project description. But nonetheless, regardless if it's sort of a minimal document or exhibit to more expansive, it's all posted together with the JO and made available to the public on the Act 250 database in a similar way to how the district commission application records are posted. So there is a compilation of data, if you will, that is part of a JO that the coordinators issue. So just wanted to mention that. We, as you know, we also talked about just the process with the coordinators as to how do potentially interested parties become aware? What are the opportunities for participation in a review of jurisdiction and a JO process, and it's quite different, vastly different from the process as it occurs in the application review. There's no hearing. Most JOs are not sent to all adjoining landowners, et cetera. So, thanks.
Sarah.
So I understand the reasons why you made the change. I have concerns about it because I think that part of the direction that we're going in is some really good reasons for perhaps having us take appeals. And this might be a strike against us if we can't streamline the process and we have to take something de novo and look at everything all over again. I think that if you take a look, I'd sort of tried to make a similarity coming into this with robust municipal experience and not a lot of state experience. Was the jurisdictional opinion is a little bit like a administrative officer or zoning administrator's determination, which anybody can appeal that sort of an email or something like that. However, usually there's a nicety somewhere that happens along the way of, you know what, I thank you for the email, but I'd like something a little bit more formal from you that we can discuss, and if I need to appeal, and then there's an actual like written decision that is usually the basis of a appeal of a zoning administrator, and a decision of record to be able to review that gets recorded. Similarly, doesn't get noticed out to all the different adjoining property owners unless that appeal happens, and then the appeal becomes that trigger notification to the different property owners and other people that might want to partake in that process. So I would say this does give me pause. I can understand why you're going with de novo right now, but I'm not sure that, and thank you, Kirsten, that was great information. I'm not sure that we've fully exhausted the ability to have this be on the record.
Well, I don't think that on JOs, a small number of them, and the fact that they go very quickly at the court, I don't see the potential for saving a huge amount of time on these. I was of the opinion before, oh gosh, let's shut it down. Let's not, allow discovery or any of that stuff. And what Kirsten was saying about, there's a lot of complexity about, I can go and get a JO and, district coordinator can say, there's no jurisdiction on your property. I can go, peachy keen, thank you, and go on my way. None of my neighbors are going to know. And there is a process by which you can formalize that decision and make it binding on other parties by serving them with it. And you go through a formalized situation, and then they have appellate rights for the normal 30-day appeal period once they're served with it. And so we started to delve into that, and should we require it to be formalized, and should we require the JO in the first instance to be served on all possible adjoiners? But what about the other people who are not adjoining that could possibly have a property or a they could be impacted by it in a negative way, might have constitutional standing, yada yada yada. So we were like going down this rabbit hole about how JOs currently are obtained, how they may not be served, they might be served, and honestly, it is more than I think we want to bite and chew, bite off and chew. What I was trying to do is two things. One is stay as consistent with the court as possible. They do not see any value at all through the don't think processing times would be sped up in this process, but they also are concerned about due process with no record below, basically. You have no hearing. So that was one of their major concerns. Now, I would prefer to stay as consistent with the court as possible on these kinds of things if it was working for the court. And what I'm hearing is, and I have been, sort of looking at the statistics, there's a big difference between the JOs and the permitting. Of course there is. I just don't see there's enough value to be gained timing wise to change it from de novo, given that broad gamut? What if there's one email? What happens at a hearing if it were to come to us? We look at an email and say, what? If we say what they don't like, they're going to just start over again, probably, and go back and give more information. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like you have this process, and then what in the future does that leave the applicant to be able to need to go do to get a different opinion? Maybe they didn't give enough information below and they needed to explain it better and they blew it at that first opportunity. That's about the formality of it. They could come to the LURB or to the court and say, well, I didn't explain that sufficiently. Let me tell you exactly more about it. I don't know. I was won over, and I'm trying to see if there is a convincing argument to go on the record on this. The other issue that the court brought up was what we heard during the stakeholders meetings, and that is they confirmed there is an extremely critical problem with getting transcripts. Now, we can say we'll take a tape, but there's no hearing or transcript. And so there are concerns about on the record when you have nobody to create anything from below. From a hearing is an issue that pertains more to the permitting side of things, which we're giving a relaxed standard. We're like, you can send us a tape, that's good enough. In the JO setting, we don't have that other safety valve or option.
So especially Brooke, your argument that doing something other than de novo for a JO isn't going to necessarily give bias less. It's not going to speed the process up. So I think I'm inclined to agree with all of the recommendations that you got from the court and the coordinators and our commissioner in District 4. Sarah, are you feeling okay about that? To have Brooke move forward in that way, de novo for JOs?
Not at this time, but again, I don't think we all need to be in consensus.
Okay.
But I appreciate all the information and understand why she's gone in that direction. Absolutely.
Okay. Kirsten?
So Brooke, I'm not completely understanding why it wouldn't make sense to have it be a supplemental record review, but not have it be difficult to add information. Like at least have the appeal process start with the benefit of that lower level record and readily add information to it. I mean, I don't think we would want to call it the same thing, otherwise it'd be confusion. But could that path make sense?
Oh, well, I mean, if you're going to liberally apply a just cause standard in this supplemental record review of ours, it may be the functional equivalent of de novo. I mean, you're looking at
depends on that record. Yeah,
it depends on the record. I mean, we may get very little and it may be kind of like a de novo because they don't really say much the first time around. But sure, I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't look at the record. The question is, do we limit it to that or allow them to give more info?
So that could be put into practice somehow, that maybe sort of the legal status is de novo, but it does incorporate, that lower level record as part of the information in front of whatever appellate body.
Or we could just use the supplemental record review standard and, they need to show just cause. Oh, well, there's other information I need to give you that I didn't have before. So I have no problem with that.
Yeah, there may be other information that becomes known or other people may bring forward.
That's more of a middle of the road. It recognizes and pulls in the record. It just doesn't limit it to that information. And that way, Tom Little's biggest concern is the lawyering up at the JO level, at the district coordinator level. So if they know
Yeah.
it's not their last chance, that will alleviate a lot of the stress and expense. We hope.
Okay, so you think the middle of the road is a good path forward? It sounds like what Alex was maybe asking whether we could consider early on here in this discussion.
Sure,
Okay,
absolutely. I'll switch that to supplemental record review if that is more suitable and a little bit better. You know, I may not satisfy Sarah's concerns. But the other thing is that today I got, during the meeting, I've gotten an email and a memo from Judge Zone that looks to be about 7 pages. There's some really good information in it that may put some light on this question, because one of the things that they are giving us is some context in terms of how many cases there are that are being processed versus how many are being appealed, which is really, really interesting. You know, I'm trying not to get myopia, and I know I have it. It's like, oh gosh, what are we doing with these appeals? And these appeals are a pretty small number. And so I'm trying to step back now, because his information obviously is going to be important to step back and look at it from the 40,000 foot view. So I will share that information as quick as I can with you all, because I would like you to be able to review that before we look at the first draft next week.
okay, great,
So you have
thanks.
some time to digest what they're saying. And sorry, this was way more than my 5 minutes.
Yeah, I guess so, but, so, we have a discussion of appeals and enforcement coming now as our next agenda item. Anybody?
I'll
wanna
make that motion. Yeah, sure. So I move that we enter executive session to discuss pending appeals and enforcement, and recognize that the premature public knowledge of these matters would put the board at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Alex. Sarah?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
I didn't hear Brooke's aye, but I saw her say it.
Aye.
That's unanimous. So we will be coming back to this meeting to report out from our executive session. And before I enter the executive session, I'm going to take a bathroom break. So see you in a little bit. Okay, we are all back and I believe we have two motions to put forth. Kirsten, did you have the first?
Sure. I would like to make a motion that the board enter its appearance in docket number 25 ENV 00083.
Okay, thank you. Sarah,
I'll second it.
thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And Alex, so that is unanimous. That one passes. Alex, I believe you have a second motion.
I move to authorize our enforcement team to transmit a proposed assurance of discontinuance in case 2022_83 with a directive to apply for an after the fact Act 250 land use permit, pay a $2,000 civil penalty and reimburse $984.04 for enforcement costs incurred.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. And there is nothing left on the agenda.
Make a motion to
Kirsten?
adjourn?
Okay, thank
Second.
you. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.